Hello students, good morning to all of you. Today I want to start chapter number 5th as we have already completed chapter number 1st and 2nd. 3rd and 4th are not in your syllabus as CBSE has deleted these both chapters. So in this footprint without feet, in this story, one scientist who did a lot of experiment. His experiment was based on objective, how one can make a human body transparent. The scientist did many experiments and finally he got the result. He discovered the medicine, but he used this medicine on himself and he became transparent. Generally, we have heard a lot of story about transparent body. I am remembering here, I saw one film, Mr. India, in which main character who used to disappear and just helped the people, those were suffering. And same way, this scientist also disappeared. His body became transparent, hard but transparent. Transparent in sense no one can see him, but he can see everyone. Okay, that type of medicine he discovered, but he used this medicine on himself. After that he did a lot of illegal work. He became offender, a lawless person, and so many mistakes he did. Even he did murder, and finally what had happened with him, we shall see here in this chapter. So let us start. One day when some children who were playing near a house, they saw some footprint getting down from through the stair of a house, and only the mud footprints were there, but the body was not visible. They were very surprised to see how these footprints getting up, and finally when after some time these footprints were become fainter and fainter, and then disappeared. So they followed these footprints, but they were surprised because from where that footprints were coming. So let us start this story, which type of story particular is, and which type of work this scientist did, and finally how he was caught and taken to the police. But very interesting story is there. So let us start this one. Two boys started in a surprise as at the fresh muddy imprint of a pair of bare feet. These two boys who started following two feet which were just full of mud, that getting down from a house and making imprint. Okay, that footprints just were getting up, were muddy footprints, but human body was not visible. What was the barefooted man doing on the steps of a house in the middle of London? Question is there. What was this man doing with bare feet just in the middle of the London. The question is there, and where was the man? And after that, where was this man gone? So this, let us see that one. As they gazed, the remarkable sight met their eyes. This sight was remarkable. It's a very interesting sight was there. A fresh footmark appeared from nowhere. They didn't know from where this footprint were coming up. See, further footprint followed, one after another, descending the steps and progressing down the street. These footprints which were coming up, these both boys followed these footprints that they came down from the upper side and getting down the stair downward from a house. Descending from a house, the boys followed, fascinated, until the muddy impressions become fainter and fainter. At the last, disappeared altogether. These boys followed these footprints. They were very fascinated, were willing to know, very interesting how these footprints were coming up, and finally these footprints were fainter and fainter and disappeared at last. So the explanation of the mystery was really simple enough. The bewildered boys, here bewildered, puzzled boys, had been following the scientist who had just discovered how to make a human body transparent. These boys were following one scientist who discovered medicine to make a human body transparent, and who used that medicine to himself, and he became transparent. That body was scientist who became transparent and not visible to these boys. Griffin, the surname of the scientist was Griffin, had carried out experiment after experiment to prove that the human body could become invisible. Finally, he swallowed certain rare drugs, and his body became as a transparent as a sheet of glass. Though it also remained as solid as glass. So this way he did so many experiment after experiment, and discovered this medicine. And when he swallowed that medicine himself and become transparent, and his body was as solid as glass, and become invisible. So, brilliant scientist though he was, Griffin was rather a lawless person. He was brilliant, no doubt. He discovered a very important drug, but he was lawless. He was offender. He did murder there. He even ran away after killing his landlord. His landlord disliked him and tried to eject him. His landlord means that is in which house he was living. He didn't like Griffin, and he wanted to drive him out from his house. In revenge, Griffin set fire to his house to get away without being seen, and he had to remove his clothes, and he ran away. He killed his landlord. He put his house on fire, and then he quietly, without looking to someone or to visible to someone, he wanted to run away. He put off his all clothes and then become invisible and he ran away from that area. See, thus it was that he became a homeless wanderer without a cloth, without money, and quite invisible until happened to step in some mud and left footprint as he walked. He became invisible. He was homeless. He didn't have any money. And that incident when he was wandering, his footstep fell in mud, and before this incident he wandered here and there without having food, without having money, or without having cloth, and he just so he became appeared when his foot was just fell in muddy water. See, he escaped easily enough from the boys who followed him footprint in London. He escaped away easily without being caught, without just as you see, these boys were surprised. They were not knowing who was there and whose footprints were there. So he just escaped from this boy. But his adventures were by no means over. He had chosen a bad time of the year to wander about London without clothes. His adventurous activities were not ending, as he had chosen bad time, because bad time in sense this was winter time, and without clothes it was difficult for him to survive. So as he wandered here and there from one place to another without bearing any cloth, or see that it was difficult for him to survive in such a cold night. So this time was, see, it was midwinter, the air was bitterly cold and could not do without cloth, without bearing cloth. He couldn't just survive, do anything. Actually, if he will bear, so he become visible. That's why it was not possible for him to bear cloth, and he was wandering naked here and there, becoming transparent one, and this way that was difficult for him because cold wind and chilly wind was blowing. So what he did, he, instead of walking about the street, he decided to slip into a big London store from bar. So what he did, he entered in a storeroom. A big storeroom was there, closed storeroom was there. So he entered in that storeroom to save himself from cold night and coldness. So closing time just arrived. As soon as the door were shut, Griffin was able to give himself a pleasure of clothing and feeding himself without regard to expense. Without any expense, he was able to get the comfortable cloth from the store, and for some material to eat, feed himself. As the time was the closing time of the shop, and he entered in the shop just before closing, and then this way he got this opportunity to save himself from the sea. He broke open boxes and wrappers, fitted himself with out of bomb clothes, soon the shoes and overcoat and the wide brimming hat, and become a fully dressed and visible person. In the kitchen of the restaurant, he found cold meat and coffee, and he followed up the meal be the sweet and wine taken from the grocery store. Finally, he settled down and sleep on the pile of quilt. So this way he did it. For this much enough for today. For the rest of the thing, I will come again tomorrow.